Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello.
Hi, Cindy.
JC.
Today we're going to be talking about faucets.
So do you have any history? I'm assuming it's going to start in Egypt about 4,000 years ago.
I do have some stuff later about Egypt. But a lot of the top-rated companies, like in our trade magazines, and especially, I think it's important if you're purchasing a faucet that you're able to easily get replacement parts.
Yes.
So I kind of focused on a lot of the companies that are not only rated very high, but you can pick them up at your local hardware store or home improvement store. So Kohler actually started in 1873, and they're still around, one of the top-rated companies.
Are you going to spell all these because they're all...
I might spell one or two.
Okay.
American Standard started in 1875. Chicago Faucets, 1901. Price Pfister started in 1910. That's a good one to spell. So Pfister is P-F-I-S-T-E-R. And it was Emil Price and William Pfister. They started creating garden faucets, and that's how they started their company. And then in 2010, they actually just got rid of the Price, and now they just call their company Pfister.
Wonder how his family feels about that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a feud there that I'd have to try to uncover.
Although if they're still getting paid, who cares, right?
Yeah. Get the royalties, man. 2011, actually, Price Pfister had the first adjustable kitchen faucet where it would easily adjust from 8 to 11 inches in height for bigger pots. And then Moen has been around since 1937. Well, actually, in 1937, Al Moen, he burned his hand on a two-handle faucet. So in 1939, he actually invented the classic single-handle Moen faucet, and that's where that started. And then Delta started in 1954, and they had the first successful washerless valve. And the valve was, when they were developing the valve, the shape of it, one of the guys said, hey, it looks like that Greek letter Delta. And so that's the name they picked to start their company. And the Delta company also makes, if you see Delta Peerless, or Brizo, B-R-I-Z-O. That's their premium line. It's kind of like a fashion line of faucets.
So if you're thinking about replacing your faucet, what kind of things do you need to be thinking about?
So the key thing is to really know how many holes are in your sink and then the spacing. So for a bathroom sink, most of them have 2 or 3 holes. 3 is probably the most common in a bathroom sink. And they're going to be 4 inches on center. So those, if they have 3 holes, those 2 outside holes, the centers of those are about 4 inches apart. And so that's the type of faucet you're looking for, because not all sinks and all faucets are going to be compatible. So you need to know the makeup. So it's
right, like my grandmother's sink, which was my parents put on an addition a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And in her bathroom, it's actually the holes are in the countertop.
Okay.
And so there's 3 separate holes.
Right.
So and it's not like a decorative plate or anything that is attached, so it's 3 separate things.
Right, so you have your spout and then 2 individual handles.
Right.
So you need, exactly, and you need to know the design and how far they're spaced. And if you have something that's not the norm, if you have a sink, you've just moved into a new home and you want to replace that old faucet, and if they're not, the standard 4-inch, then you're looking for something that's called a widespread faucet. And that's going to allow you to, like your grandma's, you're going to have a spout and then 2 individual handles, and you can space that pretty much any width. Some are limited because they have a joining supply line that connects them, so you have to be conscious. 8 to 16 inches, I would say, is probably the norm for a widespread, but again, look at the packaging, and it's going to give you a very clear picture, of how you're going to be able to attach it. And then for bathroom faucets, you need to know whether you have a pop-up drain. So in your sink, if you have a stopper that's connected to that little pull rod that opens it and closes it, you've got to have that center hole.
On the back of the faucet.
Correct. Now for kitchen sinks can have 1, 2, 3, or 4 holes. So it's pretty interesting. 3 and 4 hole, like if you have a stainless steel sink, a double bowl, is pretty common. If you have an odd makeup, you look at the packaging, and some faucets are going to come with this scutcheon or a deck plate, it's called. So it's this wide base that can cover up some of these unused holes.
Right.
And then you can always add, if you find a faucet that you just love, and let's say you have an extra hole that's not going to be covered by this, then you can always add a soap dispenser, and then they have blank cover plates too that you can put over those holes. In most of the kitchen faucets, it's going to be 8 inches on center. So if you have a stainless steel sink and it has 3 holes, the 2 outside holes, it's going to be 8 inches from the center of those holes. And that's pretty common. 2 or 3 hole sinks are probably the most common.
So let's talk about types of faucets.
Okay, so for bathrooms and kitchens, you can either get single handle or double handle. And a single handle is very easy to use, easy to adjust, especially if you have a hard time gripping normal knobs.
So if you have arthritis?
Yeah, so a single handle is really nice for that. A two-handle, most companies say that you get your best control of temperature. And I've never really found that to be a big deal, but if you look at the manufacturers and why they have a two-handle, it's for precise control of temperature.
Yeah, I think that it does a better job. Interesting.
Yeah, I've never found that to be a big deal.
Although I will say, like on a single handle faucet, like especially in the bathroom, it's a lot easier to clean.
Yeah, it's one part, and there's less little nooks and crannies to get into.
Have you ever cleaned a bathroom faucet?
Expert in cleaning. Just wait till we get to the cleaning episode.
Yeah.
You can also get, in kitchen and bathroom, you can get touchless, which has an infrared sensor. So when your hand is in front of it, so like in a lot of the bathrooms now that you go to, like
public washrooms.
Yeah, you go to like at the airport, man. You go in there and you don't have to touch a knob or anything. And that's going to be run by a battery in most cases. There are a couple on the market that plug in, but most of them you're going to have a battery pack. And what's nice, the manufacturers usually have a 30-second auto shut-off if there's no motion. So if you stop washing your hands and it senses no motion for 30 seconds, it automatically shuts off. So you're not going to flood your bathroom or kitchen.
So I wonder how that would work. Like my sister's cat loves to sit in the sink and just drink out of the sink.
Oh, that's hilarious. That'd be great.
So like in their bathroom sink, like she actually keeps the bowl of water for him.
Yeah, get rid of the bowl. Just get an infrared sensor, man.
Yeah, and he could just sit there all day and just drink.
Yeah. That's funny.
As long as she doesn't have to pay for water, it'd be cool.
Yeah.
Her landlord's probably not going to like it.
And then you have a touch, which, primarily on kitchens you see this a lot, but you have them in bathrooms too. It's turns on and off just by touching the spout or touching the handle, but you still have to manually adjust the temperature. But once you set it, let's say in a bathroom, to a temperature you like, where your setting is, then you just touch it for on and touch it for off.
Which I have a Delta touch one in my kitchen.
Yeah, and we actually did an installation of that on our Fix It Home Improvement channel on YouTube, and that was very interesting. It was the first time I ever installed one of those, and it has the battery pack.
Right.
So, and how often have you changed the batteries much in it?
Yeah, so I mean, I absolutely love it. It's great. The only problem is like when the batteries go out, you just have to make sure like the battery pack that's not touching anything, because then it really screws up the
sensor.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then in kitchens, you also have the pull-down style. So if you have a gooseneck style spout, a pull-down is nice for like taller pots. If you have great big pots that you're putting in there, then rather than an independent sprayer that you used to have on the side of all faucets, now it's integrated and it has a hose that you can just pull straight down. So that's very a nice feature. Probably one of the most popular is a pull-out style. So it has a straighter spout, and it has a much longer hose. So you pull out the end of this, so you have this integrated sprayer. And then you also want to make sure you get one, or I would always look at the packaging, make sure it has spray and stream settings on the end of it. But that's a real nice feature, and allows you to clean very easily or fill larger pots. And then...
So my parents have that style?
A pull-out?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So, a couple things. One is they broke the end of it. Like there's a weight on the hose underneath the sink.
Inside the cabinet, right?
Right. And they must have been trying to pull really hard because it was stuck on something underneath the cabinet. So the weight actually broke in half. So now you have to kind of feed it back in.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to replace that faucet for them. But now with my touchless, I just touch mine to turn it on and off. And so like when I do the dishes by their house, I look like an idiot because I keep touching the faucet to try try and turn it on.
Ma, you need batteries.
My mom's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm trying to turn on your faucet, duh.
Funny. A new type of kitchen faucet you can get is called articulated, and it has segments. So the spout is in sections, and each one of these sections are movable, so you can shape it into multiple different positions.
That's weird.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. And like with this, one of the key things that you're thinking about if you're purchasing a kitchen faucet is how high that spout is going to be. And, if you use large pots and pans, you need to be able to get under that. So that's one thing to look at. Look at your sink, look at the type of pot you have, and depending on...
I'd say also like the height of your cabinets, your kitchen cabinets.
Yeah, true. Yeah, if they come down. Most have a raised cabinet there. But it's important to think through all this stuff. And then also, depending on your bowls, some of the goosenecks are real short. And so when you try to turn them left or right, it doesn't go to the center of the bowls. So these are some of the things you should be thinking about when you're looking at the style. So it's just convenient when you get it back home.
So I think we should talk about warranties on these faucets, because if you're not just changing your faucet for just the style, right, because you don't like the style anymore, a lot of these companies have really great warranties on their faucets, and there's really not that much that can go wrong with a faucet.
Right. Yeah, and we'll talk about the different parts and depending on the faucet, but the warranty is amazing. Some have a 5 or 10 year warranty on their inexpensive line, but just a good quality faucet with most of these manufacturers that we were talking about have lifetime guarantees. So whether they guarantee it against leaking and the finish going bad. So just excellent to look at the box, and really sometimes for just a few dollars more you can get something with a lifetime guarantee for no leaks, and the finish is going to stay looking great.
So you just have to keep your receipt?
Absolutely. Keep your receipt. Some of them want you to register it, but the key thing is on most of these purchases, just have somewhere where you keep your receipts and hold on to it, because most of these manufacturers are fantastic. If you have your receipt, there's really no questions asked, and you can either go back to where you purchased it, or you can just call them over the phone and they'll send you out. A lot of times they'll send you out replacement parts or a new faucet.
Well, like I have a file of like all my appliances, just all the, the books.
The manuals.
Right.
Yep, very smart.
And that way I have the model number and everything.
Yep. And then one other thing with the finish, they have a new process that's called PVD, and it stands for physical vapor deposition. And what they do is they take metal atoms, they put them into a vapor, and they bond it to the surface of the faucet. And this creates a very durable finish. In fact, some of these finishes are 20 times more scratch resistant than chrome. So if you look at the box and you're comparing a couple styles you like, if you see something that says PVD, that's probably one of the best finishes you can purchase.
And I think that's one of the problems with buying an inexpensive faucet, is that the finish, when you're cleaning it, it rubs off.
Comes off, amazing.
You can't get spots off of it.
Yeah, when we were investing in real estate, we just always bought the cheapest because we started with no money. And we had so many callbacks over the years where we ended up replacing them, or, like you say, our tenants would be cleaning them and it just tears off the finish. What's funny is, even talking to a couple of the manufacturers, one thing that they said to me was just buy one that's heavy. If it feels heavy, it's really probably much better materials, brass and the stainless steels. And so, the weight of it, the thickness of the material itself that they're using, you're going to have a much better faucet. And then I would always be looking at the brand, the replacement parts, and I would check it. So if you're purchasing a faucet, I would ask the salesperson, hey, what's the type of replacement cartridge, and do you have it?
Right.
And that's what I would consider, because what a hassle if you can't find the parts. And that's what's the problem with buying some of the imports or some of these off-brands, because you can't easily get the replacement parts.
So if we're talking about just being in the aisle of faucets, looking at the display, or, all the boxes there, either if it's not wrapped in a zip tie,
right,
these expensive faucets, open the box and make sure all the parts are there.
Yeah, crazy.
The amount of people that steal parts out of these faucet boxes or off the displays is shocking.
You would never believe
it. And I mean,
it.
at some of these, you're spending good money, $100 or more on a faucet. You get it home and not all the parts are there. How aggravating is that?
And it's just a hassle. They'll have your receipt. They'll replace it. But what a hassle to go home. But yeah, if most of these, your better grade faucets are either sealed or they'll have a cable tie of sorts around it. And like at our stores, it was shocking how many aerators were stolen out of these more expensive faucets, or just, parts.
Soap dispensers off of it.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Amazing. So there's one other thing I forgot to mention. You can actually get antibacterial handles on some faucets.
All right, so explain that.
Well, this is good. So 4,000 years ago, you know what the Egyptians used to use to sterilize wounds and drinking water?
No.
Copper.
Really?
And so these new antimicrobial handles are made from a copper alloy, and it actually will kill microbes that are on your handles, so on your faucets. So it's pretty interesting. These microbes, they love dark, warm environments. So especially the bathroom.
And the kitchen.
They love hard surfaces. Some of these microbes can last for weeks just sitting there for you to touch it and then move it to other surfaces.
It wouldn't be one of our episodes if we didn't talk about creepy, crawly things. Or Egypt, apparently.
So what's wild is these copper alloys, they will kill bacteria in about 90 minutes, and they've done a lot of research on this, and the EPA found that these copper alloys kill over 90% of disease-causing bacteria when the surfaces are kept clean. So you need to clean once in a while, because if you have dirt that's covering the handle and then the bacteria is on top of the dirt, it's not doing any good.
Right.
But these new antimicrobial handles, they say, just do an excellent job. In fact,
so that's going to be labeled on the box?
Yes, it's going to be stamped on it. And they're doing a bunch of research now in a couple university hospitals where they're putting these alloys in the bathrooms. They're also putting it into a lot of the areas where the patient waiting rooms, and that they say that they're just reducing the amount of bacteria as they swab this. They say it's actually pretty amazing how effective it is.
So I guess let's talk about the styles of faucets, like the guts of it.
Okay. So the oldest style is a compression style. So it's like a stop valve where you have a stem with a rubber washer on one side, and as you tighten down that valve or turn the knob, it closes on a metal seat. And then when you unscrew that, the water flows through this metal seat. You compress it down. The problem is every time you're compressing that rubber, it's slowly wearing it out. And a compression style faucet is the most prone to leaks. They're very easy to replace, that washer. And then, especially on very old faucets, you can replace the stem, washer, and you can replace that metal seat very easy with a little universal tool. And then there's a ball style. So the handle itself is connected to a ball, and underneath that ball there's usually two rubber seats that are spring loaded. So as that ball rotates, it has holes in it that line up to those little rubber seats, and that's where your hot and your cold come through. The problem with a ball washer is that minerals slowly build up and it scars those rubber seats, and then as they get little nicks in it, then that's where you get a leak. But again, very easy to replace these parts. You have a cartridge style, and there's a couple different styles of cartridge. So like a Moen cartridge, all the internal parts are working inside that cartridge. And then you have a cartridge like for the Delta faucets where the cartridge is sitting on one of those rubber spring-loaded seats. Then you have ceramic, and these are two highly polished ceramic discs, and they're the longest lasting. They're a little more expensive, but most of the faucet experts say that the ceramic is the best because they just fail very seldom. And many of the manufacturers have a lifetime warranty, and if they ever go bad, they'll mail you a new one for free. And again, keep your receipt on these, but they're just very effective.
So your faucet is leaking.
Okay.
And you go to the hardware store, and you're standing in the faucet repair aisle.
All right.
And it is a overwhelming sight even to somebody that works in the hardware store,
Right.
because there is a million different types of cartridges, stems,
O-rings, seats.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. So how do you know what you have?
So the key is pulling out your old cartridge or stem. So you want to, if you have a leak in the handle or a leak coming out of the spout, you want to turn the water off. So the shut-off valves below the faucet, turn that off. And then you're going to have to, in most cases, remove the handle first. And you're going to either have a set screw that you can see, or there's going to be a set screw that's obscured with some type of cap or a sticker. Mm-hmm. Remove the handle. In most cases, you're going to have some type of retaining nut. You might have a decorative, like a scutcheon over it, and then you remove that, and then there might be a retaining nut that holds your cartridge or stem in place. The exception is going to be a Moen single handle faucet that you're going to remove the handle and an outer cover, and then you're going to have a metal clip that you need to pull out that's going to release the cartridge.
Which we've done a lot of videos on this.
Yeah, so on our Fix It Home Improvement channel on YouTube, we have a couple nice videos for the Moen faucet, and there's a few steps to that which are nice to know.
Isn't it important not to scratch a lot of these things,
Yes.
like on the handle?
Yes, and again, you need to make sure that you're covering. If you have decorative nuts, you want to make sure that you're covering it with a cloth or a piece of smooth leather. Sometimes you can use so that you can grab it with a pair of, let's say, channel locks. You can adjust it, put light pressure on it, and turn it. You never want to scratch the decorative pieces. But once you get that stem or cartridge out, and now if you don't know by sight what style it is, you can take it to the hardware store, and they're going to be able to help you. So if you have a...
But it's important to bring it with you, because...
Absolutely.
There's so many different styles. It's not like, hey, my faucet's leaking. What do I... give me something to fix it.
You've got to know. There's no guessing. So if you have a compression or a stem valve and it's leaking from the spout, you're going to be changing that washer on the end of that stem. Come back home, and then if it's still leaking, then you have a problem with the seat. One troubleshooting tip: if you look at the washer on the end of a compression valve and it looks like it's tore up, that means as you tighten it down every time, the seat itself has little nicks in it, and so you're tearing that washer. Mm-hmm. But you're going to change the washer first. Then if that doesn't do it, you're going to change the seat if you have a leak out of the spout. If you have a stem valve like this, a compression style, and it's leaking out of the handle, then you're going to change that packing that's around that nut that is holding the stem together. And they'll be able to help you. It's either called a stem packing or a bonnet washer. If they don't have that, you can put a little piece of Teflon winding in there. You take the nut off, you put a little piece of this winding in there, you tighten that nut down, and you can create your own washer to stop a leak out of the handle. So very easy to do. If you have a cartridge style, you're either going to have a Moen single handle. If it's leaking from the spout, you just replace the whole cartridge. And when you replace a cartridge, anything that has O-rings on the outside like this, you definitely want to use plumber's grease. Mm-hmm. Because now if you have a buildup of materials or rust on the faucet body, as you force that cartridge back in, if you get any nicks on those outside O-rings, it'll leak out of the handle.
Right, so you just made your problem worse, or you didn't solve your problem
at
all?
You have a new problem. So for a single-handle Moen, if it's leaking out of the spout, you replace the whole cartridge. If it's leaking out of the handle, you replace the O-rings on the outside of the cartridge. For a cartridge like a Delta or a Peerless, it has these rubber seats with springs underneath it, and if it's leaking out of the spout, you're just going to change those seats and springs. Very easy to do. If it's leaking out of the handle, you replace the O-rings on the outside of that cartridge. Again, always use plumber's grease. If you have a ball style and it's leaking out of the spout, again, you're going to replace those seats and springs. If it's leaking out of the handle, on a ball style, it's called a cam washer, C-A-M, and there's two primary styles, so make sure you bring that with you when you go to the hardware store. And then if you have ceramic, and it's leaking out of the spout, you just replace the cartridge in most cases. Sometimes it can be one of the O-rings or a gasket on the bottom of that ceramic cartridge, but in most cases, it's the internal parts. And then if it's leaking out of the handle on a ceramic style, it's the O-rings.
So you mentioned plumber's grease. You can't use anything else, right?
You would never want to use any oil, petroleum-based products, or, a lot of the old timers used to use Vaseline, and man, that's what they'd have a tub in their toolbox,
right.
They'd grease it up, and it slides in really easy. So fantastic for sliding it in. But what they found over years of looking at this, that Vaseline actually swells up the O-rings and shortens their life. So you want to use plumber grease. It's a silicone-based product that is designed specifically for this. And it's food grade safe, so if any of it touches water, you're not worried about ingesting this.
Which it comes in like a tube.
You get a tiny little tube,
and I mean,
cheap.
it'll last you forever, because how long are you going to use it?
Definitely. I've had somebody, when I was first starting, again, I didn't know any better. I watched these plumbers do the job, and so, okay, I can replace it, but I missed that step. So I'd replace, like Mowens were big here in Chicago, and so we'd replace that Mowen cartridge, and then I'd get a call back from a tenant saying, hey, now the handle's leaking. Okay, it's not leaking out of the spout anymore, but now the handle's leaking on this brand new cartridge I just bought.
So if you're replacing the whole faucet, what are some things you need to think about?
So just an overview, the key thing first is turn the shut-off valves for the hot and the cold water off. And then what I always do is turn on the faucet just to make sure that those valves are working. Because if they're real old multi-turn valves, then you might have to shut off the main. But the first thing, turn your shutoffs off, open your faucet to make sure they're off. You're going to remove the supply line from the valve. And one of the best tools is just a real small adjustable wrench with smooth teeth, or a smooth jaw rather, no teeth, and just a tiny one. It almost looks like a cheap tool,
right,
but it is one of the most handy tools for this type of plumbing job. And then you want to remove the supply line from the faucet. So an excellent tool is called a basin wrench, and what it has is a 90-degree flexible spring-loaded jaw that you can push up to the top of the nut that's holding the supply line, and you can use one hand. It locks down on that. You can loosen it. You can flip that head 180 degrees and tighten it. So it's just a handy tool, because sometimes you can't get your hand up easily, or a tool in between where the sink and the faucet is, and so it's just really rough. So a basin wrench is excellent.
Well, with the right tools, this is a really simple job, because who
it's
wants to be laying in their kitchen cabinet or their bathroom cabinet?
It's really awkward. And I would say if you're purchasing a basin wrench, I like one with a long handle, so I would get the longest one just from using them. Rigid just came out with a new tool. It's called a faucet and sink installer, and we did a video on this on our channel. And it has a bunch of different fittings that you can slide in and out. And so it actually has a fitting where if you have an old style shutoff valve, you can put the handle into this, and it'll help you torque down that handle and shut it off, because sometimes they're kind of locked in place.
Yeah.
And then it also has different fittings where you can not only loosen and tighten the nut from the supply line, but also the nut that's holding many of the faucets in place. Then you're going to remove the faucet, and it can be nuts or it can be screws with a pressure plate. There's a couple different ways that, especially like a kitchen faucet, is held in place. So it's nice to have a real good flashlight. You're going to have to get under there and see what you have. And this is actually a really good time to replace the shutoff valves. If you have one of these old multi-turn shutoff valves, this is a wonderful time. Shut off the main, take that off, and turn it into one of these quarter-turn valves, and they last for decades. They are just so much better than the old valves. And then, depending on your supply line, I like the new braided stainless steel supply lines. When you change your faucet, if you're going to replace your supply line, make sure that you bring the old one in, because it's going to be, in most cases, 1/2 inch on the top where it connects to your faucet. Now, IKEA, there's a couple different faucet manufacturers who have different setup, but most of the manufacturers are all 1/2 inch at the faucet, and then you need to know what size the supply line is going to your shutoff valve. In most cases, it's going to be 3/8 compression, but it can be 1/2 inch compression or 1/2 inch iron pipe size. So you really need to bring the old one with you if you're going to connect it to that old shutoff valve.
And make sure you are purchasing a supply line that says faucet, not toilet.
Right, because a toilet's going to be 7/8 at the top, where a faucet is going to be 1/2 inch. And then when you're installing the new faucet, what I would do is I would always bleed the supply line. So before I connect the new faucet to the supply line, what I like to do always is grab a 5-gallon bucket, connect my supply line to the shutoff valve, open it up and bleed some water into that bucket. And especially if you're in an older home that has cast iron or galvanized pipe rather, sometimes rust and debris builds up in the lines, and when you connect it to your faucet, it shakes loose these particles, and you can get it into the valve or into the faucet itself. And then always remove the aerator from the new faucet and make sure that you run it for a minute or two. Again, all these particles that you can possibly shake loose on the line, if that all gets into the aerator, now you think you've got a bad faucet, or you've got all this crud inside that aerator, and sometimes it's hard to get it out easily.
JC?
Yeah, Cindy?
What are the key points from this episode?
I would say if you're changing your faucet, to make sure that you match up your sink and the whole arrangement to the faucet, because not all faucets match every sink. And then if you're fixing leaks, bring in those parts to the hardware store. It's going to make it very easy to get the replacement parts.
Okay, so does that wrap everything up?
That about wraps it up. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you could subscribe there as well.
If you'd like to email us, you can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.
Jeff,